Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wanted more success at business or your job, then do we have the Love is the Killer app show for you. Today I'll be speaking with Tim Sanders, Chief Solution Officer at Yahoo and the author of a brilliant book on business and the workplace, Love is the Killer app. And that's just what I want to talk with him about today, about bringing love to business and how to be a Lovecat to win business and influence friends. That plus we'll talk about Bob Marley, Bleeding Pink, how to turn a mad dog into a Lovecat, what we can all learn from Deion Sanders, who goes by the name Cash Spender, who in the world was the Little Reverend, and why if you want to name a company, it should end with the letter Z. So welcome to the show, Tim. Are you ready to shine?
I am ready to do this, Michael.
Woohoo! Well, thank you so much for being on the show. Before we dive right into things, who was the Little Reverend and how did he get his name?
That was me. And that was me probably age 10 or 11. I was a special education kid until 6th grade. And so my place to shine was at church. Certainly wasn't at school or, in the schoolyard. But at church, I loved to play piano and sing. And whenever I got a chance to play piano and sing in church, they always got a Steve Allen sermon before the song. Typically, the Steve Allen sermon that preceded the song was about 5 times the length of the song. It was just one of those things, Michael. Give me a hot mic and a warm audience, and I'm going to tell you what I feel. And from that day on, I've always looked for opportunities to share.
Awesome. And it sounds like in high school and college, you use that and turn that focus towards debate.
I did. So when I was put back in general population, as they say in education, I was trying to find something I was good at right away because that's a really important part of a turnaround when you're a kid like this. And I joined the debate team, and it was just a natural fit for me. And I ended up winning the state championship. I was in New Mexico. And ended up going to college on a debate scholarship where I won a national scholarship, national championship there as well. So this gift of gab was something I've always tried to put into context for myself. And ironically, though, Michael, I get out of college and I go to work. I literally don't give a public speech for 15 years after my debate experience. And when I showed up at broadcast.com working for Mark Cuban, fortunately for me, he didn't like to make presentations unless it was a really big crowd. So I was kind of the van turkey doing all the small little talks at conferences. And that's where I kind of got back into my groove with speaking.
Well, it's awesome. And it's interesting how you had that skill early on. It went away, but it's found its way back. I'm real curious because we have so many parents that listen to the show. I was special ed briefly myself around first and second, third grade as well, before going back, general population. Would you say that you were struggling in school or that you actually had many gifts but couldn't figure out a way to put those into a narrow, tight classroom environment?
Okay, so I have to paint you the picture. This is like probably 1969, 1970. Mm-hmm. I had been abandoned by my mom at four and a half. My grandmother takes me in. And you can imagine I'm kind of a wreck. And I kind of get through kindergarten and first grade okay, but I've always had kind of like discipline problems. By the second grade, I started to disappear. So what I mean is I would go to school and I would go find a place and I'd hide. I'd hide in a bucket. I was a very small kid. I'd hide in a bucket. I'd hide in a closet. And they'd call my grandma, we can't find him. He's lost. After about 5 incidences like this, they didn't know what to do with me, so they put me in special education because in the late 60s, early 70s, they really didn't know what to do with kids that were chronic discipline problems, especially really young kids like me, second grade. And so once I got into special education, of course, everything is self-paced. And that's where I really figured out accelerated learning. The reason they put me back in general population is because I finished their junior high curriculum at the end of the 5th grade. So it's like, what are you going to do with me? And so they basically said, if you don't figure this out, it's reform school or whatever they call that, boys school. So they put me back in. I was a really good boy, 6th grade. And I kind of turned the ship around 7th and 8th grade, joined the debate team. And the punchline, Michael, is the same bullies that would punch me in the nose and take my lunch money in the 6th and 7th grade. Those are the guys that put up the posters and campaigned for me when I ran for senior class president and won against a cheerleader. So, when I think about my experience in special education, I think about my experience dealing with bullies that didn't understand me because I was different. I always kind of think back about what my grandmother taught me. And she taught it to me one day. It was picture day in the 7th grade. A guy had punched me in the nose in the bathroom, and I had blood on my white shirt. I actually didn't take the picture that day. I thought she was going to come to school and take that parent of that boy and just give, because she was a tough woman, and give him the business. Instead, she looks at me. She takes a deep breath. We're sitting in the vice principal's office, just the two of us. And she says to me, she says, "You know the problem here?" And I go, "What?" She goes, "The problem here is that you don't love that boy enough."
I love her.
I was like, look at my shirt. Are you kidding me? This is the second time he's done that to me. And she looks at me and she says, "Listen, you don't love people because of who they are." She says, "In this family, we love people because of who we are." She says, "Don't you understand? Bullies aren't mean. They just don't get enough love. So they express that, and they express it." So she suggested, and at the time I thought she was just crazy. She suggested that, in fact, what we should do is invite him over to our house the following Sunday after church for lunch. Of course, I invite him over. I never say his name because he's a friend of mine now, and he's always hurt when I bring his name up. But I invite him over. He's still kind of picking on me. He didn't punch me, but he did steal one of my little Matchbox cars. It didn't go that well, but he felt, or his parents felt, that it would be a nice reciprocation to invite me over. So a few weeks later, I go over to his house after church, and then I discovered that my grandmother was right. When we walked into the house, his drunk of a father who never came to church literally threw a beer can across the living room at his head, yelling at him, "Where have you been?" His older brother, after lunch, whipped him in front of me with a horse harness, and I realized this guy had it worse than me. So we became friends. And I kind of learned with the bullies that a person who is angry or aggressive, what they need is someone who shows them empathy. And more important, they need somebody that they can talk to that they think is going to help them. So I would always give them advice about dealing with the vice principal, or I'd always give them advice about don't beat that boy up. It might hurt you from getting to go to homecoming or something. And, by the time I was in junior high, all the toughest bullies in school were sure that later in life, I was going to be their defense attorney and keep them out of the pokey. And, what this all comes down to is that Abraham Maslow was absolutely correct when he said that so long as we have the unmet need of love in our life, and maybe in some cases self-esteem, we'll never self-actualize. In fact, we go the other way in life, trying to find shortcuts, trying to find targets like bullies do. And so it's completely changed my paradigm. And, if I were to tie this to my business life, what I learned as a salesperson and what I learned as an entrepreneur is that the biggest blockers and detractors in the room can become your greatest advocates if you will just absorb and understand and appreciate the fears that they go through. I've learned that most of the people, when I was working for Yahoo, that would push back and say, like retailers, e-commerce is never going to happen, they'd say, and they'd be very aggressive. I'd say to myself on the inside, they're really afraid because the world is changing really fast. And what they need is not a debate. What they need are a series of empathetically delivered insights about how the world worked, how friction worked in commerce, what the future could be like for them 5 years hence. And I learned that you could turn the biggest business bully into your number one cheerleader by taking a pause and trying to see things from their point of view. And that's been a real driver of my personal success and my professional success over the years.
Woohoo! That is huge. That is absolutely huge. And that ties together a lot of the strings along the line that I see, the golden thread of your life. Why you didn't go into law, for instance. You started going down the music path, probably wanting to share some love there. How did that go for you? And how did you circle around and then get back into the business world?
So that was an interesting turn. So I debated at Loyola. There's a scholarship they give every year. I don't know if they still do it, but there's a law firm in Houston called Jaworski Spurlock, and it's called the Jaworski Spurlock Award. And they give it to the top debater in the nation every year that's going to go to law school. And you get a full law school scholarship to Baylor University. And anyway, so I win it. I'm excited. I visit Waco, but I got to be honest with you, it didn't seem like the right career path for me for a bunch of reasons, especially when I thought about being a litigating attorney or whatever. So over the summer before I was supposed to start law school, I saw a reggae band play at a little restaurant bar in Tucson, Arizona, when I was there coaching a high school debate camp. And when the singer sang "Is This Love" by Bob Marley, I was captivated. So I hung out with the guys during their break, got to know them a little bit better, found out that they needed a keyboardist, decided to join their little group, ended up forming my own rock reggae band by the end of that summer, grew dreadlocks, never went to law school, broke my grandmother's heart. She'd been home bragging that I was going to be an attorney for, 6 months or so. And if you will, Michael, I went on kind of a walkabout for a year and a half. And I think it was a real good experience for me to travel the country and meet all kinds of new people. I was born in such a small town. It was a cultural immersion for me. And I eventually ended up in Dallas when the bus broke down and they flew back to Jamaica to go on with their life. And that's when I got a haircut, a nice white shirt, and my first real job selling mobile phones at the launch of the mobile phone industry.
And you met your wife too, I understand.
Absolutely. A few years later, also in Dallas, I met the love of my life, Jacqueline. We've been married, 27 years now. And there's a lot of great secrets to success when it comes to that too. But I'll tell you that, everything happens for a reason. And so many times people ask me, they say, well, if you could go back to your 20-something self and give one piece of advice, what would it be? And I've thought so much about that answer, Michael. But in reality, if I really could, do you know what I would say? Whatever it is you're doing, keep on doing, because it's like Back to the Future. I don't want to change a thing. I just wouldn't want a thing in my life to disappear that I have today. I'm just so dang grateful. And I guess that would be my advice to younger people that I meet. And that is, please focus your energy on what you have. Please focus your energy on gratitude, because we live in this social media driven world where we focus on finding fault in other people, finding people that we cannot stand, finding things that we wish we could have, and it consumes you and blocks you from being a high function, intelligent person. And I tell people, I say, listen, gratitude produces a gracious attitude, which will save you from the thinking machines, and they're coming. So I tell people all the time, you've got to add insane human value to compete in this new world. And the first step is to design a positive mindset by your day-to-day actions and the choices you make.
Is there something you do to, at this point, it's wired in, you've got some good brain plasticity going, but is there a step or steps that you took in the beginning to crank up that gratitude machine?
Absolutely. So I was raised to believe that gratitude is a muscle. It's not a feeling. My grandmother taught me if it was a feeling, you'd feel it all the time. She says that when people lose their gratefulness, they've just gotten out of shape when it comes to noticing things and then appreciating people in their life or spiritual things in their life behind those things. So I guess it was about 12 years ago. And it was a chance conversation with Dr. John Maxwell about, I always ask people, like, what do you do first thing in the morning? And what I had been doing up to then, based on Norman Mailer, the great writer Norman Mailer's belief, he believed that when you got up and the first thing you did for the first 45 minutes is you combed your brain. And what he meant was you read something out of a book that challenged you. You closed your eyes and you rehearsed the coming day for a few minutes, especially the hurdles, so that the day didn't surprise you. And that was always his secret to success. Well, when I talked to Dr. Maxwell, I like to call him J-Max, he had a twist to that. He says, I don't do anything for the first hour either, because breakfast is the most important meal of the day for my mind. But he did this one other thing that I was like, wow, I'm going to start doing that. He'd write a thank you note. That's the first thing he would do, is he would take his pen, and by the way, I do that. I'm reaching around here. These are thank you cards. See these?
You rock.
You rock. And I like to write these with a real pen. I put a real stamp on them. I like to mail them. Anyway, I thought, wow, you know what? If you think about psychology research, that which we allot time to and do becomes dominant in our thinking process. So I said, all this value I've been getting out of reading books and rehearsing the coming day, what if I had a gratitude exercise? So here's what I do. Here's the secret. So when I first wake up, before I do anything else, start the coffee, the dog demands a short walk. I come back in, I sit down in my office, I close my eyes, or if I'm on the road for a gig, I lay back down and I put a cold compress across my face, because that'll improve your memory. your recollection ability. And what I do is I locate 2 people in the previous day that helped me or us be successful.
Brilliant.
So I locate those 2 people and I say their name out loud. And then the most important thing I do is I review the impact and the intention, because the more specific gratitude and recognition is, the more valuable it is to other people and yourself. So I'd say, okay, what did Karen do for me yesterday? Or what did she do for us? I focus more on what did she do for us, this mission that we're on. And I talk about this to my mind, the specific things she did that were thoughtful and the impact it's going to have in the future. And then the most important thing I review is, and why did she do that? This is very important, because if you look for the intention behind people in your life that are doing good for you, you will never get the answer because she felt like it. It's not it. Because you were lucky. You'll never have that answer. Every person who ever helps you in your life that makes a difference helps you because they love you, or because they're part of the mission and they're bought into the purpose. Those are the only 2 reasons that people go out of their way to help you or us become successful. And the reason this exercise is important is because it deeply programs into your psyche that we are not alone in this fight, that I'm not the lone wolf out in the world, and it makes me feel very connected. I've added a twist to this over the last few years. The whole thing takes less than 10 minutes, by the way. I also imagine someone in the coming day that is going to help me and help us become successful. Dale Carnegie used to teach this in the 1920s to his YMCA students. He called it giving credit, and it has a huge impact. If you Google the Pygmalion effect, what we expect of people is detected and then lived up to. So if I think about that person and I think that person's going to add a lot of value to the mission today, it changes my attitude towards that person. They can feel that expectation and they always rise to the occasion. And let me tell you what happens. If you do this every working day of your life, the most important change isn't just that you're more grateful or that you have better relationships or you feel more confident. The change is your aperture, your ability to notice things you never saw before expands, because if you're high function, you're going to get tired of writing the same note or giving the same thanks to the same person each and every day of your life. So out of boredom, you're going to try to find new rock stars you can acknowledge. And when that happens, Michael, people will appear out of the shadows and the crevices of your life that you've never even bothered to say thank you to, or even hi to, or even smile back to. And so to me, it's one of the creative challenges is to recollect from the previous day that person I didn't notice at the time. And when you can turn that noticing knob up and give appreciation more, you're not just a happier person, you have the capacity to be a much more effective leader and a much more effective member of your community.
Woohoo! That is huge. And there's something, thank you so much for sharing that. There's a piece of that I was bookmarking beforehand, and you kept coming back to it time and time again. And I think we can go all the way back to 2nd or 3rd grade for you and draw the timeline all the way forward. You are, and this is the first time I'll use this word, hyper present.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I really try to anchor myself in the moment whenever possible, right? And I tell you, I didn't know I was doing that until years ago. I heard this band Underworld, it's an electronic music band, had done a pirate remix of a spoken word book by Eckhart Tolle called The Power of Now. So and I've got to send you a SoundCloud link to this. It's the bomb. So it's this neat, electronic feel, but it's got Eckhart Tolle saying, you are not your mind. One of our greatest afflictions is our inability to stop thinking. We chew on our mind like a dog chews on a bone. And I mean, that hit me really hard, that the ability to be present is a superpower. And it requires incredible focus and incredible faith and incredible mindfulness. But I knew that if I figured it out, again, making the leap, I wouldn't just become a happier person. I would become a better business person, and I would become a much better leader of human beings. And so the irony is, like 4 years later, I'm working on my 2nd book, which was called The Likeability Factor. It's about emotional talent, emotional appeal. And we were researching authenticity. So we learned that one thing that makes a human very likable is that they're authentic. You really believe they're sincere when you're with them. So being kind of a wonk, we did studies. So one of the studies we did is we went out and asked almost 3,000 people, do you consider your manager or your boss an authentic person? And when they said no, and by the way, 25% of them said no, then we re-interviewed them, not with multiple choice, but with narrative. And we kind of got down to what are all the reasons you don't think they're authentic. The number one reason was pretty, obvious. That person lied to me about something. But the surprising number two reason, and it wasn't an exact phrase match, but it was the same concept, is that they're furtive when I'm around them. They're easily distracted when I try to talk to them. They care more about their cell phone than the meeting we were supposed to have. It's that dishonesty of promised engagement. And I was like, wow, we are heading into this smartphone world where every boss never really takes a meeting with you. They partition 25% of their attention for you. No wonder we don't believe that boss is an authentic person. So I've been giving this advice for years now to managers. If you want to be more effective and be more trusted and be more respected, leave your cell phone at your desk when you have a meeting with someone and just sit with them like I'm sitting with you with absolutely no distractions. And it makes a huge difference on your ability to influence and generate trust. And I'll put kind of an exclamation point on this importance of presence. So another part of the research we did for the likability factor is we went out and interviewed people that had spent time, even small amounts of time, with what we called high L factor personalities. So using our assessment, we'd say, well, a high L factor personality, Bill Clinton, for example, a very big part of his brand was, especially on a personal level when you meet him, if you set aside politics, highly likable guy. Same goes for rock star Bono. Same goes for Oprah Winfrey. And the same goes for Herb Kelleher, founder of Southwest Airlines. So let's just take those four. Sure. I managed to talk to several people that spent time with them on social and personal and business stuff. And what's so amazing, Michael, is they all say the same thing. They say, I was a nobody in that meeting, and Bill Clinton locked on to me, paid laser sharp attention to me. He treated me like I was the only person in the world. A person said to me, I met Oprah Winfrey on the set of her show one day, and again said, and I'm not a celebrity, but Oprah Winfrey not only just treated me like I was the only person in the room. When someone tried to interrupt us, one of her producers, without even losing eye contact, she brushed that person off as if to respect me. And I said, wow, then I think that's the secret to really connecting with human beings, is to be that one person they talk to today that actually gives them their full attention.
Absolutely love it. And I can't no other way but woohoo! You are sharing. These are life lessons. First off, this isn't just about the workplace or just about your job. This is your relationship. Can't you picture the first dates that people are going on today where they're both sitting down and they're looking at their cell phone instead of each other?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It's the world we live in. Jerry Seinfeld said the first time he went to Los Angeles to have meetings about television shows, he said they were the weirdest group of people. You'd go into their offices and everybody will put their cell phone at the middle of the table, and if it rang, they'd get up and walk out of the room. Jerry said he wanted to run into the hallway and call them on their phone so he could have 5 minutes of their undivided attention. And that was 10 years ago. Things are a lot worse. I think it is going to be all of our greatest challenge to be on point and on focus. So I'm a sports enthusiast. I'm also the kind of guy that likes to see what's going on social. So several years ago, I think it was like 6 or 7 years ago, I made the conscious decision never to bring this with me when my wife and I are out doing anything. So this stays home. Boom. I don't need a phone. She got a phone. There's an emergency, she can call. But I go out, I'm literally like phone free. If I bring anything, I bring a camera. Makes me more social. And it allows me to go out and spend real time with her. Why did I do that to myself? Because I have friends and they can't resist. And we see them. And you say something and they go, oh, hold on a second. Let me Google that. And all of a sudden they notice they got a text. And all of a sudden they're checking their Facebook and they do it. And it irritates their partner. And I think, well, why don't you stop? And the answer is we can't. And sometimes, like with me, the secret is cut the cord, or in this case, leave the phone at home.
Yeah, and I've actually I'm fairly radical about this because I found this years ago. I was out on the trails. I was hiking. It was part of my healing process. And the phone rang, and it was a dear friend of mine. and I didn't pick it up, but I went home and canceled my phone service, kept it off for years. Now I have a backup emergency phone. I don't even know the phone number of it. If I want to be on, I'm going to be on, but I want to be fully present and engaged.
That's right.
In whatever that activity is or whomever I'm with.
And let me tie a little bit to this too. So it's like presence is always important. So I tell people, I like to do video chat, even though, I had to like get my hair pretty and get the lights right, because I know that your audience deserves at least the best. But when I talk to people, I love to do video chats whenever possible. I push them. I don't want to do a phone call. I say, let's do a video chat. I want to see you. I want to get to know you. I want to like you more. I've learned that we can fall in love with anyone if we're sitting across the table from them, because we're going to recognize things in them that we admire, and we're going to see little visual cues that we're going to miss on the phone. But here's what I say. If you're going to give phone, give great phone. And what I mean by that is if you're going to have a phone call with somebody, respect their time, do your research, have a plan for the conversation. Don't make it a conversation on the go. I can't tell you, especially in business stuff. I'll talk to one of my partners, and I'll fully prepare, and especially if they're one of the millennials, and I'm not picking on millennials, but I'll fully prepare for this call. I think we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and I send them something to think about, and so I'm on the phone with them, and I'm walking through. Leaders have to have cadence, so I'm walking through the call. I'm super conscious of time. I'm feeling like the other person isn't really as engaged as they should be, and then all of a sudden I hear out of a boombox, "And would you like fries with that?"
Oh, no.
And I flip out, okay? But the reason why is because I believe time and attention is such a precious resource, and we should prepare. We should totally focus on whatever medium, whether we're face-to-face, whether we're on video Skype, whether we're on the phone, because I think that's one of the things, along with caring about people, that really separates you from the pack in a good way.
I love it. It's a reason all of my calls I try to do on Skype, because there's a richness of that communication. They say that 95% of communication isn't even coming out of your mouth. It's coming from your hand gestures. It's coming from your face. It's coming from other intangibles. You can't get that on the phone, and particularly somebody's driving down the road or eating a Whopper, forget about it.
That's right. That's right.
Let's talk. You mentioned a word earlier that I think is real important. You talked about it with presence. We're going to talk about it with another L word here. You called it a superpower. So let's talk about the superpower. It sounds like it was cultivated by your grandma. It had to be intuitively in you or part of you as well. But the L word, love. What does that mean to you?
Well, you can imagine I've spent a lot of time not only reading but studying the concept of love. It's been a word that's always mattered to me. I've been the kind of guy that says I love you to people where they'd be like really shocked because it would be my teacher. It would be my vice principal. It would be my manager at the cell phone company. And I would say it honestly out of some sense of vulnerability. It just became a part of my lingo because I'm a hugger. I'm a guy that likes to care about people. I don't think it's just a superpower. I think it's oxygen for effective relationships. So what happened was I was working for Cuban, and when I went to work for him, it was the first environment I'd ever been in where love and caring and compassion for the customer was actually a value of the company. In fact, Mark Cuban's motto at that broadcast.com startup was make love, not war. Because he believed through his experience, especially for technology companies, that they talk a good talk about how much they care about their customer. And when the customer calls, you put them on hold, and then you fight with them to pay the least amount back on mistakes and to get the most profit. And he goes, we're not going to be that kind of company. We're so much smaller than our competitors. We're going to go into the market. We're going to find out exactly what the customer wants, and we're going to give it to them. And our innovation challenge is to learn how to make a profit on that, not how to get money out of them. And I was like, wow, for the first time, I'm in an environment that so fits my values. And so I was doing some research, like, what is love? Well, Milton Meyerhoff, famous philosopher, psychologist, he wrote a really great book years ago called On Caring. It's the best definition of love or caring, that non-romantic form of love that I've ever read. He says, love is the selfless promotion of the growth and happiness of the other.
That's huge.
That's what it is. So it's a charitable, not about me, not the Abraham Maslow deficiency love. I want somebody to love me. It's the I selflessly want you to grow as a human being and to become happy, which is the absence of negative thought, right? And I love that definition, but I was a little troubled, you see, because I was adapting it to work. At the time, I called it BizLove. It was a little training program I was developing at the time for the broadcast.comers and then later for the young yahoos about how to be successful in business by promoting success in other people. So the conflict I had, Michael, is that we can't be selfless as employees of a company because we have a duty to make sure that company, keeps the lights on because it affects everybody in their families. Yeah. So it's an interesting balancing act. So my definition of love in the professional context emerged as the intelligent sharing of my values, my intangibles, my knowledge, my network of relationships, my human compassion to promote growth and success in other people I do business with. So, break that down. Intelligent sharing, knowledge, network, compassion, designed to promote growth and success in other people. And I so specifically pointed it to those that were searching for answers during times of great change. Much like the bullies of the past, those disrupted business people I met with were the ones I could love and help the most. And by the way, generate the most loyalty from. And they generated all the opportunities that rolled out to me over those coming years.
Let's break this down. And let's start with the word sharing, because I think this is so important. And we can go back to your early days and talk lingerie for a minute, in fact, because you were sharing information that you wouldn't usually give out unless somebody is paying you for it, and particularly when they can go and work with the other guys. You were sharing freely.
Yep. So let me give you guys the context for this. So when I went to work for Cuban, I was an inside sales rep. I just called colleges to see if they wanted to put their admissions video on the internet because it's 1998. But we as a company also sold live web broadcasting events. So if it was an audio concert with Paul McCartney, we streamed it on the internet. Video was a little early on. We did some herky-jerky video broadcast. But anyway, one day a phone call got transferred to me by the receptionist. And the guy on the other end of the phone was the vice president of digital marketing for Victoria's Secret. And he just joined the company. It's 1998. And his name was Ken. And he says, Tim, he goes, I'm calling because I've joined a company that's very late to the internet. They'd only launched that year. And we need to do something spectacular. We need to get attention. We need to probably think about, generating more e-commerce sales. We're completely living on catalog sales now. And so he and I talked a little bit about, I kind of thought various videos you might want to put on the web or whatever. And then he mentioned kind of offhand that every year in New York City at Cipriani's, they have this lingerie fashion show with the Victoria's Secret models, and they've never made a CD or a DVD or any kind of recording of it. Would that potentially be an interesting thing to stream? Well, of course, I dropped the phone. I'm like, yeah. That if we broadcast that on the internet, it could have a huge impact. But it's going to cost a lot of money. And so I initially talked to him about different ways to think about the production approach based on what I'd already kind of learned at the company to minimize costs. And then the thing is, when I hung up the phone with him, we were going to talk in a week. I kind of stepped back and asked myself, well, what can I really do to help him not just make a big splash, but to become more successful with this company's, late entrance to the web. So at the time, I was reading like a book every single week on the future of e-commerce and information technology, et cetera. I kind of caught that from Mark because Mark was a very voracious reader. He believed that preparation was the key to success and that most business people were too lazy to read long form and to have deep understanding of complex ideas. So anyway, for the first time, I did something I now call prescriptive reading. I put myself in Ken's shoes as a retailer that targeted women customers in an aging industry of catalog sales. And I put myself in his shoes. I literally go to the bookstore. I find this book called The Net Gain by McKinsey's John Hagel. And it talked about the idea that, FedEx, the information on the label being more valuable than the contents of the average package. And I realized that in the future, organizations like Victoria's Secret wouldn't have value because they have designs on lingerie or women's apparel. They would have value because they had customer information that was low cost to leverage. They didn't have a database, I realized, not of email addresses, just mailing addresses. And that has an incremental cost to it that's going up daily. So My next call with Ken a week later wasn't a pitch to close him on that broadcast. It was a 1-hour conversation about net gain and what it meant to retailers like him. And the opportunity then shifted away from let's get a lot of PR to let's create an event where people can sign up and register to have an exclusive seat at the event. We're going to capture their email audience. We're going to find out if they currently receive the catalog and give them an option to opt out of the paper catalog and opt into the digital catalog instead, which would allow Victoria's Secret to increase the frequency of when they sent content to those people, probably sell more to them over time, and then save over $4 a year on mail and print costs. So when I had that conversation with him, he shared that with his bosses. He looked like a genius. I sent him a copy of that book via FedEx with my Cliff Notes so he could, read it quickly and be that teacher internally. Well, he got very loyal to us. And you can imagine we ended up closing that deal. We produced the broadcast. I further convinced him to buy a Super Bowl ad because our webcast was going to be a week after the Super Bowl. They ran it during halftime. And suffice it to say, and there's a long story behind it, the internet crashed during our webcast. I don't literally mean it crashed, but the servers in the United States ground to a halt. You couldn't get your email on AOL, and about 6 minutes into our broadcast, it was over. And we collected over 250,000 that day, email addresses, 400,000 by the end of that month. And more importantly, and this is another thing I learned, we were well received back at Victoria's Secret. You see, when I first went to Mark and told him about the Super Bowl spot, he was just like, "Are you kidding me? We can't do this. The web's not big enough yet for that many people to try to watch a video live at the same time." So he has our guy in marketing do mock-ups of the Wall Street Journal and New York Times coverage of the webcast that said it failed. I couldn't even log on. And I flew back to Columbus, presumably to get the contract signed. But before we had them signed, we put the fake newspapers in front of them and said, "Mark says this is what's going to happen." We got a pool going back at the office of how many minutes this thing goes on before everything grinds to a halt, and the coverage might be negative. And so the president of the company, Grace Nichols, kind of looks at all this stuff, and she smiles, and she says, "So what you're telling me is that our brand and our value is so great that millions of people are going to crowd onto one stream and bring everything down, and all of these newspapers are going to cover it." I'm like,
Bingo.
"Yes." And she goes, "Question, do you think anybody's going to give us their email address and opt out of the catalog?" And I said, "I guarantee 100,000 at this point." I had no idea it was going to be so big. And she smiled and she says, "Sounds like a healthy problem for the brand." So anyway, when I fly back after it's all over and it's crashed, but I've got that CD in my hand with the database. When Ken Weil saw me at the top of the staircase there at the limited corporate headquarters in Columbus, he wasn't mad at me. He gave me a huge bear hug. And this is a dude that doesn't give hugs, okay? He's not even a side hugger, Michael. He gave me a hug and he says, "I love you too, man." And when we walked in, he said, "We shared that information you showed us widely, including our board, and everybody knew it." So when it happened, we were like, "Wow, we really are that big." And he goes, "If you hadn't have told me that, I might have lost my job." I mean, and this is, I hate to keep bringing it back to business, but that's where I spend my life, is advising people on better business, right? So the takeaway from that little part of the story is that setting expectations is an act of business love and empathy. You should really understand what your product or service does, where things can go wrong, and be extremely upfront to the point of losing the occasional deal to people about how it's really going to go. Because I believe that surprise is only a positive emotion when followed by happy birthday, okay? And the key for us is to have the courage to be transparent, to have the ethics, to be honest, and to love people enough to put yourself in their shoes in these situations. It makes a huge difference.
Thank you so much for sharing on that. And I can see if somebody put all the newspapers in front of me saying it's failed and I saw my name in it, I'm going to be going, "Wait a second, you mean I've got all this free publicity even if the thing didn't work?"
That's right. No, they expected us to go out of our way to avoid that failure, and we tried as we could to try to get more partners. In fact, when we did it the second time, because they wanted to try it again, except now we were going to paint the Concorde pink and put the girls on it and fly them and do a chat and do it at the Cannes Festival in France, just because I'm ratcheting this thing up. Let's get crazier next year. Cuban's like, "Okay, this is cool, but we can't have it fail again." And so what we decided to do was to bring in our biggest competitors and create an alliance because it was more important that Victoria's Secret succeeded than we take all the money.
There's a word that maybe, well, it's probably been around on the internet. The first time I heard it with you is in today's book, coopertition.
That's right. We decided to be coopertition focused. We call them competimates. Coopertition is a great book from the late 1990s. And what coopertition studied were industries where cooperation led to leverage. So, for example, airlines compete like crazy during the year to win us buying seats on their planes. But one time a year, they lock arms like wrestlers at Denny's on Saturday night, and they go compete or they go bid against Boeing or McDonnell Douglas. So by being co-opetition then for the airlines actually lowers the cost of their manufacturing because it reduces the opacity of the whole bidding process. It creates some form of collusion, but in a good way. And it's successful in so many industries. And I personally experienced the same thing as well. So we bring in Microsoft, we bring in Real Networks or Victoria's Secret. And I realized that the challenge in a co-opetition environment is you have to make sure that your competimates move from me to we. So the most important thing we had to do was to bring everybody around the table and focus them on the fact that there had not yet been a significant live video broadcast that had succeeded. And if it did, there would be a time in the future, maybe 10 years hence or so, where we would actually compete with television for live viewership. And it was a huge, as Jim Collins says in Good to Great, a hairy, audacious goal. And I kept emphasizing that in every meeting, and that anything that we did to compete against each other, anything we did that was revenue focused and not result focused, actually delayed the maturity of video streaming on the internet. We focused on it. So when one of them would try to do a little bit of an account grab, we would keep them in their place by saying the purpose of this alliance is not to make money. The purpose of this alliance is to make meaning out of what we're trying to do. And that's kind of what I learned, because I got to be honest with you, Cuban at first thought it was just kind of crazy to bring all the competitors in because he felt like they might do a behind the scenes deal and actually agree to do it free. Because some of our competitors like Microsoft, who had Windows Media Player, they could do it free and write it off. We couldn't. We had to get paid. We were a startup with just IPO'd and we needed to show profits. But I learned that you can work with competimates if you have ground rules. You can work with competimates, especially if you establish trust. And in many industries, like professional service industries, like architecture, a little 4-person firm that figures out how to create alliances with competimates and then collaborate with them when they get stuck, they can beat big firms because they don't have bureaucracy to move through when they find a real innovation. So that's what I talk to small businesses about all the time. When you go to conferences, find that competitor, a technical competitor who doesn't play dirty with you in the market, and create a standing alliance that you'll lend your expertise in exchange for their expertise. And you're gonna punch way above your weight out in the market, and it really works.
So on that note, when people are going to listen, you're going to wonder, how did Vic Secret 2 go?
Oh, it was great. It technically went great. Did it have the same audience? No, not quite. I mean, it probably had half of the audience. There was no Super Bowl ad, et cetera. It was early in the morning. It went great, and they were able to actually sell product online during the actual webcast, and it was very important to their, I don't want to say stock price, but it really buoyed their stock with investors to show how cutting edge they were. It was a high profile event, and it led to a very long-term relationship when I went to Yahoo with the Limited, including other brands like Limited 2, Lane Bryant, et cetera. So yeah, the second one worked great. And yeah, we didn't make as much money. That got spread around a little bit more, but surprise, surprise, Yahoo buys us pretty quickly thereafter. And for Mark, it was a, pretty good event. I think they bought the company for between $5 and $6 billion. So I think that the success of serving clients like Victoria's Secret and showing strong growth in technical was part of that and part of our overall success as a startup, especially for our investors and owners. Awesome.
How did you, when you got onto Yahoo, you weren't at the top of the food chain. What was the secret that helped spring you up as well?
So, I'll tell you the secret. And I was thinking about this the other day, like if somebody's like, what's the one thing that happened? Because to paint a picture for you, when we sold, I had been promoted to like the assistant director of business development, which is like a fancy name for a guy that worked on larger deals, right? So I was still a sales guy. Yeah. So I go to Yahoo, and they quickly determined that I was a very research-focused person that was good at making presentations. And at the time, this is like 2000, we were being challenged to prove that digital advertising had any value because like no one clicked on banners. Remember those days? So we created something called the Value Lab. I had 2 employees. I was director of those 2 employees, and went out and started to really talked to a lot of our biggest customers. And then I eventually got promoted another 7 times over the next 2 years to the chief solutions officer position. But here's what happened, Michael. Mm-hmm. The first day I'm out in the Silicon Valley, in Santa Clara, at the corporate campus, I got my tray in the lunchroom. By the way, the lunchroom at Yahoo at the time was called Earl's, URL. Get it, Earl's?
I like
it.
And
so I walk into the lunchroom intending on sitting down with my new team and having lunch. And I looked around, and the scene looked like something that should have been in the movie Clueless. It was just a bunch of clicks. And you could tell they were clicks visually. You could tell the engineers or the propellers and their dogs were over there doing their thing in their own little world. Mm-hmm. The marketing people had their own little world. The content people had their own little world. Sales had their own little world. And I made a decision that day that changed everything for me. I decided I would never eat with my own team. Because I already knew them. Yeah. I saw them every day. We had a conference every year. We all got together. No, I decided every single lunch I would sit with a new group. I would set my tray down at their table. I would introduce myself. If they were mad at sales for ruining the website, I'd take my beating with a smile, and I'd listen. And I listened very intently for opportunities to help. Because one of the things I believed, and I figured this kind of out earlier in my career, is that success and collaboration and building a network comes down to feeding the favor economy. So every time I had a chance, I'd sit with the guys in engineering, and they'd say, we're getting ready to make a presentation to the CFO on trying to get a bunch of new servers. And I'd say, I'm great at PowerPoint. Let me help you with that presentation. Or another person would say, well, I'm getting ready for my annual review and I'm trying to get the job to VP. And I said, well, I tell you what, after lunch tomorrow, let's mark out an hour and I'll role play and I'll be Greg Coleman and I'll be that guy and let's go through it because I know him well. And these are all real stories. Or I'd sit with another group, maybe the IT security guys, and they say, yeah, we're trying to get to Todd Teresi over in finance. He hasn't answered our PO request. I'm like, Todd, work with me at broadcast. I would literally go to Todd and say, knucklehead, call these guys. And so systematically, I did a bunch of favors during those first 6 months. I always did them, but I did a lot of them. I focused all my spare time on doing favors like that. My boss was kind of confused at the time why I would do such a thing. And then 6 months later, I get brought in on the Ford opportunity. We hadn't really billed much to Ford. It was not that large of an account. It should have been a huge account. We hadn't established a great relationship. And I knew that it was a complex situation. So I built my first little deal storming team. And it involved 8 people from across the company, different disciplines. I brought in everyone who really had a stake in the outcome. And we cracked the most amazing promotional idea. It led to a multi-million-dollar deal. And that's when everything started to change for me. Because what senior management saw is that I was a peacemaker. I was a bridge builder. I was taking a company that was largely dysfunctional because they fought amongst silos and brought them together around the table to increase revenue after the dot-com crash, which occurred in the middle of 2000. And we rebuilt $800 million of revenue with real companies in less than 2 years. And that's the reason why, even though the Yahoo case story has not turned out well in 2017, that's why the company was independent for another 17 years after the dot-com crash, while Excite and Lycos and eToys and all the others that couldn't figure this collaboration thing out, they died. And what I took away from this is that the best time to create relationships is long before you need them. Right? That's an old saying, but boy, is it true. And I think this idea of feeding the favor economy, especially around sharing knowledge, sharing your network of relationships, I think that's something that I should tell every young person that goes to work. I tell this to anybody who starts a new job. I tell this to any person who says, my company just got acquired by this giant. What do I do? And I say, get in where you fit in and be the most generous person they've ever seen. If they don't scratch their head and say, that guy's too nice to be successful, you're probably not trying hard enough.
Woohoo! There's an important V word, and I want to jump into a couple other words from there. But a V word, not victory, although that's what happened. You brought value to to each table, each lunch, each interaction. What can I bring to you? What value can I bring you to help you in your circumstance?
That's right. That needs to be the pressing question, because if you will be very focused on just this adding insane amounts of value, I call it multiplying value. You know, I want to multiply the value of every person I do business with. I want them to be smarter. I want them to be more connected. I want them to be more confident. If you bring that to every business interaction, you're going to build a very important brand, and it's going to create a promise. And that promise is going to be your business card. And I tell you, it's not just about what you accumulate or accomplish through all of this. I've always, to take a page out of Covey Sr.'s book, I've always kind of started with the end in mind. So I'm the kind of guy that can fast forward to Tim at 80, shuffling around in Boca Raton, and someone asked me about my career, and I smile. And I talk about those war buddies that I love. And I think about my real currency, which is not my following or my bank account balance. I think about those love stories. And I kind of realized that that's probably the true for everyone at the end of their life. So, you know, I think a lot about how can I be a successful person and achieve goals, some of them material, some of them spiritual, but do that in such a way where, as the Dalai Lama says, at the end of my life, I can look back and I can enjoy it a second time.
Awesome. Awesome. This has been such an amazing interview. I've got just a few more questions and a wrap up. If there's time, a very short exercise, a gratitude ritual. But what's the importance of kindness and compassion?
Well, I think the importance of kindness is that kindness can be an antidote to those that are searching for someone who cares. I think that kindness is the foundation of all of our relationships. I have a policy in life. I observe no unfriendliness, and I push myself not to do it. If I find myself frustrated to the point where I'm about to get mad at somebody, I tell them, I'm frustrated. I'm feeling angry to you, but I don't want to be angry to you. And I ask them to help me avoid the moment of unfriendliness. So I think that kindness is a practice that ensures you won't die of loneliness. Now, compassion, on the other hand, compassion is your desire that others do not suffer unnecessarily. To me, that's it. And my compassion then causes me to approach life like a designer. So if I have compassion for an employee, I think about employee experience design, and I put myself in her shoes and think about every little transaction in the day that she has with me or my company. And I say, I've got to eliminate all of the unnecessary suffering, and that makes you a better leader, right? But I think it's true in every single interaction that there are people in the world that are suffering from things you'll never understand. And the most important assumption you'll ever make when something doesn't go your way and you're about to get angry with someone, I want you to assume that that person, that human being, is operating under the best intentions. Because they usually are, right? And, you know, I talked about Covey Sr. earlier. He told me a story one day years ago, and I don't think it was in 7 Habits, so I'll share it with you now. It's really interesting. One of his trainees, a Wall Street broker, had been killed in the market that day. And he's going home on a long train ride, and he's pretty depressed. And he's on a train car with this woman and 5 of her kids. And the broker says the kids were crazy. They were throwing things and they were screaming, and it was just nuts. And so the stockbroker turns to the woman and says, "Why can't you handle your kids?" And she looks back at him with glassy eyes. And she says, "I don't know." She says, "They just lost their father, and I'm taking them to their grandmother's. And quite frankly, I don't know what to do." And the stockbroker said to Dr. Covey, "I will never see the world the same way. I will always try and ask myself what is really going on before I yell at somebody again." And I think about that. So even after I heard that story, I was, as a manager at Yahoo, I would hear a lot of complaints. So somebody would say, "Well, so-and-so, we need to fire that guy. He's been fighting with people during meetings. He's been late twice in the last week." And I'd say, "You go find his Tiny Tim story. You go find it, because there's one there. I guarantee it. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong." And I'm telling you, Michael, 8 times out of 10, 9 times out of 10, they come back and say, "Man, I found out that he just separated with his wife of 12 years. She took the 2 kids. He's been sleeping on a couch in a storage place for the last week." And I go, bingo, how dare you judge this guy? What would you do in that situation? So that's something I learned in my coaching of other people that I kind of took away from Dr. Covey's very simple idea that everybody's got a struggle. And it's our job to find it and our job to resonate with it and show empathy to it.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. What's the term, your term, NSPS?
Nice, smart people succeed. Nice people can get taken advantage of, but nice, smart people intelligently share with others to promote success. Nice, smart people have technique. In other words, they give what they're willing to lose. Nice, smart people learn to expect nothing in return. In fact, smart, nice people assume that others pay it forward, which releases them from the shackles of reciprocity, or what did I get in return, or why didn't that last leper say thank you? I mean, these things are all part of the ego of being a human, and they're natural constraints. But when you believe nice, smart people succeed, and you think about your technique of giving, you'll often be provisioned, but you will never be taken advantage of. And so for anyone that says, well, I've tried to do what you do and it always turns out wrong, I just smile and I say, you need to improve your technique. And if somebody says, okay, Tim, after 17 years of talking about this, give me one like little technique that makes the biggest difference to being a highly generous person and continuing to not be, to do that forever and not be cynical. Well, I've learned, help heroes. Devote your time and your energy to mentor those that demonstrate heroic qualities, courage, pluck, purpose, ethics, empathy. You find those characteristics in a person, pour it on. But when you run into somebody in the world that's clearly a taker, and they see you as a shortcut to success, give them as little as you can, because I always believe in giving a gift, but don't make a heavy investment in that person, because that's poor technique. Because we givers, we're outnumbered by the takers and not by a few. If we ran for election, we'd get one electoral college vote, okay? We got to circle and we've got to align ourselves with each other. My buddy Adam Grant, he wrote a great book called Give and Take. He said shunning takers is important. Because giver alliances, man, that's what makes the world go around.
Woohoo! Thank you so much, Tim. This has been
Absolutely.
awesome. I want to throw on my coach's hat for a real brief second. Always like to give people a homework assignment so they're not just listening today. They're going to actually do something. What one homework assignment would you want to give people today?
Oh, love this. So I want you to read a book every month that improves the life of someone in your life. It may improve the life of someone you do business with, someone in your family who's struggling, but I want you to devote yourself to read one book on their behalf. I want you to mark it up like a college student trying to give an A, and I want you to give them that book along with your notes as a gift. And it is a courageous thing to do sometimes because you may come across as a know-it-all, but for many people, it'll be the first time anybody ever went to school on their behalf. And if you want maybe a good assignment on one good book to read, maybe that won't solve other people's problems, but it'll make you a more effective person. There's a brand new book called Ask More by Frank Senzo. He's a famous journalist and reporter, and it's about how to listen more, talk less, and do it all by asking the right questions that lead to storytelling, sharing, and the ability to really bond with other people.
Beautiful. Thank you. And on that note, you spent a lot of time literally on reading, and in the book, Love is the Killer app, we don't have time to go over any of it today, but on how to get the most out of a book, even your own, quote, cliff notes to put in there. So I recommend everybody get Love is the Killer app for so many reasons, but the reading, I would think for myself, I know, and for you as well, has been a tremendous game changer as well.
Readers are leaders. When you develop the habit of reading, sharing knowledge becomes natural. You solve that scarcity mindset that knowledge is power. The more you read, the more you want to give. I've had a lot of friends who've had empathy problems. There's a lot of different conditions that make it hard for you to relate to other people's feelings. The first thing they do for you in therapy is have you start reading a lot of books to explore new worlds, and it rewires you, and so does reading. In just the most general sense.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Jessica, my wife, she's the producer. She always wants me to ask a question just before the end of what advice you would give parents to help their kids today.
Well, I think that we want to, if I were to say one piece of advice parents should give to their kids, is that they should always find reasons to love the other person that they're with, and that they need to fight for those feelings, and that we live in a world that fights against those feelings. And if we could just admonish people to love and be vulnerable. I think we could make them better people in this world we live in today. And I think that needs to not just be a one-time saying for parents. It needs to be a cadence that starts when the kid is young and moves through every one of their struggles, every one of their high points. And every time they face a low point, you always need to ask them, just like Billy did, well, do you love that person? And if the answer is no, then we found the problem.
Love it. And it means also that the parent is going to have to live that as well in their lives because their kids are watching them.
Oh, dude, I got to tell you, one of the greatest struggles of my life is that I've had to be a Lovecat, right? So if anybody ever wants anything from me and I say no, they're like, are you kidding me? I thought you were the Lovecat. So I've had to model this behavior for years, but I wouldn't change a thing.
Woohoo! So on that note, what personally brings you the greatest happiness, or what I call the woohoo factor?
Other people learning. I really am like Miyagi and Karate Kid. You know, I desire my greatest happiness from the student learning and growing. So I just love it when I'm mentoring someone or even just sharing flash information with them and they take it and they run with it. I just love it. And I love acting like I had nothing to do with it, by the way. That actually magnifies my happiness over the situation.
Awesome. So on that note, where can people go to find your beautiful book, Love is the Killer App, and to find out more?
We've actually built a special page for your viewers and listeners. It's timsanders.com/Inspire Nation. timsanders.com/Inspire Nation. On that page, you'll have an excerpt from Love is the Killer App and a place to buy it. And it's a big excerpt, Fast Company, 5,000 words. You'll also have a free ebook called Feed Your Mind Good Stuff, 35 pages on how to design a more positive mindset. You can also connect with me on Facebook or LinkedIn there. So it's timsanders.com/Inspire Nation.
Fantastic. And if you didn't catch that, if you're driving down the road and you didn't catch timsanders.com/Inspire Nation, just go on over to Inspire Nation Show. We'll have the link to get you over to Tim's webpage as well. Before we do a really brief gratitude ritual, any last words of wisdom you want to share with people?
Just go out there and love people. It's the most important thing you can do for another human being.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Would you have time for a really brief gratitude ritual?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So this morning, I was thinking about a person in my office up in Calgary that manages my speaking business. And she's relatively new in the organization. And we've got a lot of complications on a thing coming up next week. And I know she's going to go to work really hard today. And so I said her name out loud. And I said, I know you're going to really get a beating for this. And I know you're probably going to spend half your day on this. And I know you're going to get behind on everything else. But you really believe what I talk about. And you're really trying to protect me so I can give the best possible performance next week. And I remember sending her an email first thing before I did anything this morning, just kind of expressing that. And I really feel like that experience has not only helped me bond with her, but I almost feel psychically like right now, everything next week just got solved, but not because of all the efforts that are going to come forward, but because of the gratitude and the mutual admiration.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you so much, Tim. This has been phenomenal. Phenomenal.
Well, thank you, man. I've enjoyed this conversation so much, Michael.
So everybody, go on out, get Love is the Killer app. You won't regret it. For everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, get Love is the Killer app, and start becoming your own Lovecat today. And shine bright. Woohoo! Thank you so much, Tim.
Thank you, dude. I appreciate it. It was a great conversation. We just can't wait to get ahead of, behind this thing and promote the heck out of it when it comes out.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also, leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, inspirenationshow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. Like, comment, subscribe. See the website. Thanks so much and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!